Yep. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's May 5th special meeting. First up, we will have Pledge of Allegiance. Rick, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Certainly.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item will be roll call.
Councilmember Busby,
Here.
Councilmember Pride,
Here.
Councilmember Hanson,
Here.
Vice Mayor Thomas,
Here.
Mayor Hudson.
Present.
Thank you.
Awesome. Public comment. If there's anybody wishing to give a public comment, please approach, I guess, me, and I can let you borrow my mic. No public comment? All right. With no public comment, we'll move on to item 5, City Council Priorities and Visioning Workshop. City Manager, you want to start us off?
Just very quickly, for those of you who were, is this working? It is? Okay, it's hard for me to tell. For members of the council that were not here in 2024 as part of the council, Councilmember Pride and Councilmember Busby, this is kind of a refresh from last year's 2024 priorities. You have a hard copy on your desk. It's also available online. There's also a red line version, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. The same facilitator that we had, the very able, capable facilitator we had last year, Giovanni Triceri, is here from RIA Collaborations again this year. And with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Giovanni to facilitate the rest of the meeting.
Great, thank you so much. Well, it's good to see you all again. Thank you so much for inviting me to come back and do this refresh with you all. What we want to do, really just to get started, is to review what happened in that session. So if you remember, we had 2 work sessions, and one was really looking at the priorities, the visioning of coming up with a vision statement for the City of Willows, and then looking at what would keep us from that vision. So that report details that process. And then we created some goals, some areas that we wanted to make sure that we needed to address that would really challenge or attack those limitations that the city saw. We went with, then the second workshop, we outlined some more detail to those goals, and then we put a priority on these. And we did that with a weighted system. So it came out this way: financial stability being the #1 priority, economic development #2, public safety #3, community engagement, infrastructure improvement, and quality of life. What I'd like to do is look at, as we look at all of those goals, see what has been completed and what is underway. And by the end of today, what we would like to do is have priorities that are reset so that the staff can come away with what is their focus for the next 2 years is what we're looking at. So with that, I know, Marty, I had some notes here. Do you want to go through that first?
I think that would be a good place to start, unless anybody on the council has any objections to that. So in talking with Giovanni and sort of preparing for today, we thought it would be useful to kind of go through the red line version, which is in front of you, which I gave to Giovanni last week, and then we decided that we'd go through it with the council, which is a combination of just revisiting things that are either have been completed or underway, or questioning whether they make sense for a shorter 2-year document. And keeping in mind that, you know, about every 2 years, you end up frequently, there's a new council. So doing a document that's longer than that, that goes out for 5 or 10 years may not be as practical, as councils often change. So more than last year, I'm encouraging the council to think of this as like a 25, 26 kind of document of, you know, concrete things that we could accomplish. That's just a recommendation I'm just considering what I just said about how there is council turnover. So with that, in the red line version that's in front of all of you, I was making a recommendation that maybe now talking about Measure I and fiscal stability in those terms is not as relevant anymore as, say, something like seek cost savings in revenue generation and continue to update our master fee schedule, update the impact fee schedule, which we're not doing this year, but I have talked to the council individually about reviewing old contracts and issuing new bids, promoting economic development and private investment. So that was one item to consider maybe adjusting and making some changes. Another one after talking to staff was just the acknowledgement perhaps that, you know, with bringing in business licenses in-house and eventually sewage payments, that there may need to be some adjustments to the finance department, and that'll be an ongoing evaluation that I just wanted to sort of, I guess, give the heads up to the council that as we move forward with some of these things we're bringing back in-house that impact the finance department in particular, we may need to revisit some items like that and the department and its structure itself. Grant strategies was goal number 2 under priority number 1, just questioning, just putting it out there. Is this a realistic 2-year goal? Who will write and implement and monitor the reports if that's something we're going to move forward with? Number 4, goal number 4, suggesting maybe we move that to economic development because it's an economic development element of the general plan. Moving on to priority number 2, goal number 3. There's a couple ones that are actually already underway, and I just was sort of, you know, spoke with Giovanni about this. Maybe there's a way to not have it a priority or goal, but an end note in the document that sort of doesn't lose sight of the fact that these things are underway and we're doing them already. So maybe they don't need to be an upfront and center goal. Moving on to goal number 5 of priority number 2, economic development, suggesting that the annexation is more like a 15 to 30-year plan, and maybe that doesn't belong this year in this document. Priority 3, public safety. That initial financial analysis has been completed now. Maybe a more appropriate goal is to revisit the financial feasibility after we have 2 or 3 quarters of sales tax under our belt and take a look. The Public Safety Committee could take a look again at whether that is something we can move forward with. This one, goal number 2 under public safety, might be better for the mayor to answer. Right sizing, enhance the Willows Fire Department, advanced life savings services. I'm not sure, but I don't know if all the things that are listed there are achievable in 2 to 3 years, like hiring more firefighters is listed under that particular goal. Goal number 3, again, we're already working on those things, crosswalks and signage. We've been talking about it a lot more recently. Priority number 4, community engagement. Goal number 2, just kind of refining whether or not engaging the citizenry, is this a council or staff driven activity? How do we decide what those town hall meetings are on? Who's in charge of making sure it's a regular, consistent meeting? Another goal 3 under community engagement is who would be responsible for initiating the business community, creating foot traffic and civic engagement over the next 2 to 3 years. I think we'd want to identify that in some sort of work plan if we're going to keep that as a goal. Goal number 4, promoting community events. Again, who's responsible for this priority? Is it council, staff? Is it the community? Should it continue to be a council priority? Priority number 5, goal number 1. Are we capable of fully funding implementation of a community improvement plan for streets, sidewalks, and lighting? Do we have the funding for that? Are we ready to do that? Priority number 5, goal number 3, develop Willows as a transportation hub. Is that something that we can achieve in the next 2 to 3 years as the life cycle of this particular document? Priority number 6, quality of life. Suggestion of maybe including a full-time children's librarian as a goal in light of some recent conversations. Hiring a full-time recreation director, just re-articulating whether, is that still a 2 to 3 year goal? City pool, again, that's already underway and, this one is going to be completed within the next year. Maybe that's a footnote at the end of the document that we're doing it. And the last one I wanted to highlight was expanding youth and adult activities, and just wondering, is that still also a 2 to 3 year goal, or is that a longer goal to look into the future? So those are some thoughts, staff thoughts on this document as you move forward with the conversation with Giovanni today. Unless you have any other questions for me, I was going to let you ponder that. I'm sure there'll be questions as we go through.
Perfect.
Thanks.
I-
Yep.
Oh, I have priority number 4 and priority number 6. Missing page 5. On the red line version, don't have a copy of it.
We don't have the infrastructure.
Well, here, you could have mine. You want to switch? Right.
I know it might be a little last minute. Is there any way that we could get the graph that shows the Measure I projected revenue over the next handful of years so that we have a little bit of a buoy as to, or even if it's just a number, it's really, we're doing it for 2 years, projected for next fiscal year, projected for the following fiscal year.
So the revenue that's projected in the sales tax,
Yeah.
the revenue
A-
is
and how it affects-
$1.9 million in a full fiscal year.
And how it affects the general fund. I think that kind of helps.
You
Well-
look at that graph.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could go, do you happen to have a copy of it, Mayor Hudson? Yeah. Next year, right now, based on the presentation I did to council, the council is looking at a roughly a $700,000 reserve at the end of the year, but we are using 200,000, so
Right,
we
there's
are
a
actually,
structural deficit, right?
right,
Yeah.
yes, so we are eating into that approximately. Please don't, it's not etched in stone, but it's approximately $200,000.
So I've got every secret little tunnel drawer over there.
If it pleases the council, I can go ahead and make copies to hand out to everybody based on the last forecasting model.
I just know like, hey, we know how much we're playing here, we're gonna set a goal that
Well,
we.
it's not etched in
Yeah, well-
stone. It's a scone or stone.
That,
It's a
yeah.
budget, so. Is
Thank
that
you.
based on the last presentation that I did?
That was on maybe.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, well, why don't you give them hard copies and then pull it up for the viewers, actually? Thanks.
So thank you, Marty. That's,
Yeah.
that's where I wanted to pick it back up with you all. I had asked, since Marty and I had talked about it, I thought it would be good to put that out there. What are the questions that are in there? The questions that I have, again, if you, I want to hear from the council on the different goals, whether you see them longer term, like pushing it out. Again, we want to concentrate in a 2 to 3 year timeframe. And so looking at, so some comments on that. And a lot of them could be just questions, like, just like we have here, questions that we would like to have answered and have part of our discussion. So a lot of it right here is just putting on the table, what are some of the questions that you have on the viability of these, the capacity?
Well, I think was a great first year with it. I mean, we had never had something like this before. I think Marty pointed out a lot of kind of not necessarily the flaws, but some of the twerks that need to be taken into consideration with this is we want it to be a living document. We want it to last a year, 2, 3 at tops, right? Where some of the things that we have on here are those, 15 to 20 year, 5, 10 year
Right.
projects. So I think trying to decide which of those are actually, okay, what can we accomplish in the next 2 to 3 years? What are our goals to set up for those long-term projects? So if we want, I'm just going to take it as an example, ALS fire department, which is advanced life saving, not basic. What's something that we can do over the next 2 to 3 years to get us prepped for that being a goal on our next goals and priorities set. So I think it's trying to find where we're at, taking those baby steps. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Right.
So, rather than just throwing out some of the broader ones that we have, such as the annexation. It's be a great idea, but let's work on the ground that we do have within our limits
Mhm.
first and see what we can do with those in the next 2 to 3 years. So.
Marty?
And just as a quick reminder, once we go through this entire process, Giovanni will come back and do a final presentation of the council. And so there will be another opportunity for some iterative discussion, but it will be a regular council meeting and more formal. And also the plan is that we didn't get to last year, mainly because I'm so focused on the sales tax, is to turn this into a more fleshed out, if you will, work plan for the staff. So your thoughts over the next couple of years are really critical in helping us to, kind of put meat on the bones, if you will, of a real solid work plan for the next 24 to 36 months for us.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. What we're trying to do by the end of this session is really to come up with the what are the priorities? And then city staff will take it and then pull together the how. So today we want to be focusing on all of these. When I talked with both Councilmember Busby and Council Member Pride, and on the phone just to get their input on this process, like I did with the rest of the council last year. And I know that one of the things that came out of there is focus. I think that was something that Councilmember Busby had particularly said. If we could really just focus on a few really key areas that city staff can do, same as Councilmember Pride, that we do those really, really well and make those the priority. That could impact the rest of the goals at some point. So throughout this time, I'm going to put out these notes here. But if there are any particular specific questions or comments on any of these goals that you could write down, and we'll stick it on there just so that we know that's something that we need to talk about a little bit more in detail. Is there anything in here as you look at it that's missing?
Are you going to go through each one individually, or are we talking about global?
We can do it individually. And then what we will do before we're done, we will re-rank these to see, is this still the right order? Is this still the right priorities for the council?
I guess the question of our newer council members, is there out of these 6, are they still the viable, important priorities, or is there another one that you may would be of value to be focused on?
I think they're all important, but as I look at the order that we had put them in, I kind of like moving community engagement forward. I like financial stability, public safety is critical, but community engagement to me comes before economic development, only in the sense of as this community grows and as we retain businesses, look to attract businesses, what kind of businesses do we want? What do we want our town to look like? And I think there's something to be said for community engagement there, because that's partly our business community. So seeing them in 4th place makes it feel a little bit like, and this is just the way I'm saying it, that we're working in a stovepipe sort of, and how do we really reach out? To me, it's critical that we're transparent across all of these things. So I think what Rick was saying is as we're moving forward on these, it's like we're not just doing one, but as we do them all, how do we make sure that as we do anything up there, we're engaging the community? So that's how I look at it. It's not like we're just doing little pieces, but some of this is going to be, how do we do everything with a community engagement thought behind it?
And and let me ask you this, because Marty did ask that question as far as who on these, is that city council members or is that city staff driving it?
And in my opinion, that needs to be somewhat coming from the council primarily, because a lot of our staff don't live in the community. And that's it just is the fact of the matter. So I think those of us that are engaging with the community, not that that's hard and fast, but whether it's a town hall meeting or regular attendance at service clubs or, the speaker bureau that we had as part of Measure I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. And without the formality maybe of a town hall meeting, when it's difficult to get people that are busy to come.
So are you saying almost, it doesn't even need to necessarily be its own line item, like it just needs to be enveloped in all the other 5 aspects? That's kind of how you're viewing that?
Well, I think, you
That-
know, every
that's-
time we do
that's
something,
valid,
the
that's fine.
the
Yeah.
Facebook, the social media, how do we just create this almost where people know what we're doing and why we're doing it? And I don't have all the answers about what that looks like, but you know, we do one mistake in the newspaper and everybody's up in arms on Facebook over it, as opposed to people paying attention to our meetings all the time and what we're doing all the time. So they're not just ready to launch grenades at us when we do anything.
Marty?
I was gonna just say maybe, sorry, maybe, community engagement is not a standalone priority like you're saying. It's a thread that runs through all of it. And I don't know visually, I don't know how you do that, but I
Yeah.
think that sounds like what you're saying to me. It's just like everything should have that lens, if you will, over it.
So maybe it's when we're looking at the different goals is what is the role of that community engagement as we execute that goal? Is that
Yes.
potentially something that?
It's like a litmus test of everything we do. How do we educate, include, promote within our community on any
Yeah.
of those items?
Any other thoughts on that? As far as we heard about the kind of reprioritization, but maybe it's more of including it in the work plan.
Yeah, I think kind of the way it's set up, it's almost like we're playing Jeopardy, right? Like we have the different categories and then we have our different price points that we're looking at,
Right.
right? And I kind of understand what Lori's saying is how do we, instead of it being that way, how do we use the community engagement aspect to sew it all together, right? How we use that as a thread to tie, our financial stability in with the quality of life with, fire department. Is there something that we can aim for that tackles all 3 of those? And can we get the community involved in that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because when you think about our community, I mean, the only reason we have city staff and services is because we have a community to serve. So what does that community want from us? What's important to our community? How do we engage them? And, when we talk about, I forget which one we talked about. Oh, the events, events in the community. Is it up to should the city's job to create events for the community? I don't think so. I think the community comes forward and does events, not to say we never would, but then how does the city support that by closing the street or making that event easy?
And that was kind of something that's going on actually in my office today. We were talking about the Christmas tree that was put up, and that's the city parking lot, and how they're like, it'd be really cool if the city like helped them or gave them the permission to like decorate that entire area and kind of make like a winter wonderland to do the Christmas tree in. And I think that's kind of what you're discussing, right? Is, working together, right?
Not being the ones that have to do it all.
Yeah.
Because no matter, if we have a city, my observation, if we have a city do something, it's never going to be the right thing. I mean, it's just, we ended up, instead of if it's coming from the community is supporting the community, and we're here to support the community also and just facilitate and help make things happen, in my opinion.
So on this one, it seems like for this plan, we want to be clear what we're asking the city staff to do. That we're not asking them to do this. We're not asking them to do this. And in this one, we're saying your role is more of that customer service when it comes to, shutting down streets and that kind of stuff. So that becomes more of that role. Is that-
Logistics of helping the event happen if it's impact city stuff.
Any thoughts on the one thing that hasn't is this one? What is the role in communication? I know that has come up in different conversations. Is the role of communication for the city?
Well, I know for the Measure I spoke to several different community service organizations. And I think one of them was not the Monday afternoon, but one was not maybe going to the thrift store and talk to that volunteer group. But I think you could probably, a council person could go to those entities and those places and share the story. And that would be, that's face to face, that's hand to hand. And that would probably be far better than social media could ever be.
The conversations are always going to be better. One of the things I think on goal 1 under community engagement, I was on the city website, as I am a lot, but just looking at our parks. So if someone's looking at Willows, or even someone in the community is looking at our Willows website, if you look at parks under Parks and Rec, it just talks about youth activities. If you look at parks under Public Works, it talks about how to rent the ball fields. Nowhere on our website does it promote our fabulous parks. I mean, if anyone just pops onto our website, we've made it an administrative, here's who we are and what we do, but it doesn't showcase some of the positive attributes we have in a community. So if someone's looking at Willows, maybe to bring a business here or something, they don't get a sense of really how cool our little town is. And we could have a history component on there. We could have just highlighting our positives. So if anything, if we were ever going to do any kind of a website overhaul, I think a portion of our website could be more of a portal for marketing and tourism, not just functional.
Well, I think that would just be a goal, wouldn't it? I mean,
Could be.
wouldn't we just make that a goal as a
Well,
website, an
yeah, we
overhauled
need-
website?
we need to update website. I mean,
Yeah.
might as well do it right. Make it a informational, useful
And I,
website. You know,
and
we've
I
already
think that
got it.
that's,
That's
that's
already
an
in the
easy,
budget proposal, yeah.
and that's an easy 2 to 3 year goal, like whether it's, like, same with like the fire department, we're discussing the fact that engine 2 is essentially retired. Or it's not retired, but it needs to be retired, and its
elderly.
replacement, getting the replacement here and setting up the finances is something that should be accomplished in the next year or 2. So I think those are kind of the goals we need to start looking at. Where some of these are pretty broad strokes. Like I said, it was our first time. We initially set this up. Now we get to come in and see what we did the first year and hammer away at it, a little bit more detail, with some fresh eyes as well. So
It's a great living document, and, and for starter, it's been very valuable. We've already, we've already got, Marty and the team put out fantastic newsletter. Call it.
The newsletter.
Yes, the monthly report, and that could be expanded slightly. Some other things. Not just what we've done with the positives. That's great information. Like you said, Rick, being out and about and talking to people, it's important. I mean, we've made great strides over the last year since our last meeting, those lines. So, but like I say, we're all in agreement. We need a new website.
the other
It's-
side of it.
Well, and I think the other thing, if we're doing the website, if you go back over to economic development goal 2, leverage existing tourism opportunities, if part of that website could have information on the museum and the wildlife refuge and Thunder Hill and maybe some of our aviation history at the airport. And, just kind of again, looking at if people are coming through Willows and they look on there and go, what is there to do in Willows? There would be a whole section on, sort of the highlights and things to do.
Yeah, the disc golf course brings folks in,
Yeah.
believe it or not.
Yeah. And the pickleball courts will too, when we get those.
Well, let's go through each column then on this. Obviously that first goal was completed, and then Marty had suggested maybe changing it to seek cost savings and revenue generation. There's a list of some things that they could do there. So I'll put that as an option there. Then we've got develop a grant strategy to pursue funds. But that it tends to be a capacity issue. And so we want to think through, is that something that we want to have done in the next 2 years? Or is that something that we hold off?
I think developing a grant strategy is more not, hey, we need a specific person to sit here and write all the grants, right? But I was kind of looking through it. It's one of those things. Do we have a calendar list of what grants are available during what times of the year? Do we have something like that right now?
We do not.
I have a
Um,
question for
That's a capacity.
Marty on that subject. When we were discussing preliminary items for the upcoming budget, one of them was hiring a individual that would be halftime community service, halftime fire, that would actually be able to help monitor grant process. Could they accomplish keeping a calendar of that? Would that be something that would be within their realm
A calendar of existing
Yes.
grants.
of opportunities?
they could try. I have a feeling that the two department heads that are going to share that person have a whole laundry list of things they want them to do. So, I mean, certainly that's a lot of research, to be honest with you. I mean, there's so many grants out there. I'm not sure one non-management, part-time person in either department could do that. So I think that's a wait and see kind of how it all works out. I think just to give you an idea though of our grants here, I mean, we have a USDA grant right now that Joe and I talk about over and over again that we've had and has been given to us since before I got here. So that's almost 4 years ago. And we're still trying to complete and get it finished and get the money spent and get the reporting done because there's been such high turnover and there hasn't been the bandwidth to work on that. And that's just one grant. Now, when you look at the fire chief and his department, who he's here and he can speak to that, he goes after grants, applies for them, monitors, reports. He's doing all of that himself in addition to all of his other duties. And he keeps track of his hours. If you saw his time card, you'd be like, wow, even though he doesn't get paid for that additional overtime. There isn't one person for all the other disciplines that can do what he's doing. There isn't like the community development director can't be dedicated to just looking for and going after grants and reporting and monitoring and executing them. It's been a little bit of hit or miss. We got a grant for Sycamore Pool, and he's doing it with the city engineer. It's not quite as, I think, streamlined as it is in the fire department. But I'm sure the fire chief would love to have an assistant to help him with the monitoring and reporting. I believe he has something he would like to add to that.
Councilmember Thomas, I think that with a lot of the grants, just like, at least in the fire department world, there's basically two types. There's the business as usual grants that like I know every year sometime in December or January, the AFG grant process is going to open. And they're super well publicized and we get a ton of emails. Hey, here's the NOFO that's released and I know to start looking for it sometime in December, January. Notice of funding opportunity. The RFC grants that I just did every, February or so, those come out and I know that they're going to come out and it's kind of like a revolving door of the same grants in the fire department world. We also get a ton of newsletters from like 3Corps in the past or like other county entities that'll push out like, hey, here's the grants that we've got from our partners. And then you go through and you look at them and it's kind of a cost versus gain analysis, that at least that I do, of like, all right, what is eligible under this grant? Do I have the time to do it? What's the likelihood of it getting funded? Some of them I don't even apply for because I know they're so competitive and the application process is so lengthy that it's like I'm essentially, it's kind of like a casino, I call it, where I'm gambling 30 hours of my time and hope for X. And how big of a benefit is that going to be if we actually do get it? But most of the grants I feel like we know about.
Okay.
Every once in a while we get surprised. Like with the coordinator grant a couple years ago, where it's like, hey, you have 72 hours to complete this. Here you go. But for the most part, we know about it.
Yeah, I just, to kind of reemphasize what Nate was trying to say, the fire department's grants are more consistent every year. They're notified. We get them, some of them year after year after year. Our field, the disciplines at City Hall, much more kind of hit or miss. They're different. CDBG, it's open 1 year, then you don't see them for 2 or 3 years. You don't know if you're going to have another shot at it. We don't always get the same ones over and over again in the other disciplines at City Hall. So I think City Hall type grants are just more challenging.
Well, simply put, then the answer to my question was no.
I guess that's correct.
Now you know why. It's all good.
So not to be a little bit of a killjoy here. One thing that in prepping for this and some of the discussions that we've had and everything like that, I'm a big fan of finding the solution and working your way backwards. So like looking at this a little bit differently. I think as we do this planning, I kind of feel like we owe it to ourselves here to understand how much money we're playing with before we start making decisions on how we're going to play or how we're going to spend that money. And right now, So we've got a $210,000 structural deficit for this fiscal year. We have a $171,000 surplus for the following year, $104,000 for the following year after that. If we commit, so first of all, I think the thing that we probably should spell out is at least for the next 2 to 3 years in this vision and planning thing, we should set up a hard floor for the amount of money that we want to put towards the general fund as savings. And then after we set that hard floor, how much are we playing with? And if, let's say, we commit to just in our projections, and obviously these are projections, it's not down to, you know, dollars and everything like that. In that projection, if we commit to just putting $100,000 a year toward the general fund over 15 years, the course of Measure I, we'll be able to maintain that 30% general fund surplus that magic number we're looking for. But if that's the case, for the next 3 years in doing all this, we have $75,000 to play with. That's it. So, and then, you know, going back to, hey, we've got full-time children's librarian and events, you know, we kind of talked a little bit about an events coordinator, a rec director, code enforcement, economic development, grant writer and facilitator. We got all these staffing things that we could pull at. We got 75 grand to play with. Now, again, that's off of $100,000 a year assumption on general fund, replenishment. But I think personally, I'd like to discuss at least, let's set a general fund floor and then back into how much money we got to spend before we make too many decisions.
And I like that. And I think another, as we realize that reality, is we also look, and we'd be looking to Marty, is as we talk about doing things, how much capacity do our existing staff has? And I know it's little to none, but is it stuff that can be, you know, picked up and done? I think we need to get out of the box a little bit on some things. I think the recreation director, maybe even some of the library stuff, talking to Chico State. Do they have programs where we could bring in interns that would function at a higher level that could, you know, come in and get some experience and run some programs? So are there some other ways to do stuff where we're kind of talking about jumping into the workforce arena and creating some other partnerships with the schools to help bridge some of those gaps? And I don't know, sometimes that creates more work initially, that can possibly be a benefit over time.
I'm trying to mark here what, which goals do not necessarily increase the cost for this, for the city government. This one, state cost, savings and revenue generation wouldn't be an additional cost. And I'm looking to you, Marty, just to.
No, because, we're already doing that. We're reviewing contracts. We're looking at a variety of ways to streamline things. And then, updating the master fee schedule. That was about increasing revenue generation, updating the impact fee schedule for, hopefully we can do that in next year's budget, would also hopefully provide additional revenue source. So I think those are things that we're kind of already doing. It's to me, I look at it as like an old Cadillac. You're trying to, do all the things you can to make sure there's no oil leaking, that, that's all the cost saving stuff, right? To make sure you got a streamlined machine running as smoothly as possible. And then you're using the best gas you can to make sure it's running at optimum efficiency. So I feel like those are things we're already doing. And maybe that's why I looked at that and said, I think we need to keep doing that. I think those are good things to keep doing.
Okay. Is there anything else in here? I put this one, add to the city's general fund. That's not extra staff time. Because and then optimize staffing to improve financial efficiency. You just said that. Develop an asset replacement plan for large equipment. Is that extra?
So that would
capacity?
be, that would require hiring a consultant. So that would be some sort of, we would need to work with the city engineer and funding. So that would be, but it would be, I do want to remind council too, like things that are one-time funding, like for example, the council saw on April 22nd, one of the things is a fire engineering. Another thing was an asphalt apron for $86K. That's a one-time expense. So once that's over, that presumably goes back into the general fund and you can count it for next year unless you spend it on another one-time expense, right? So it is a little more than 75,000 after you like take all of those monies out. But that would be a one-time expense. And I would encourage the council to think about it that way, because when the one-time expense is over, presumably it comes back to your general fund unless you spend it again. When you hire staff and employees, that's an ongoing expense that you don't ever get back until there's a vacancy, right?
Yeah.
So that would be another, the one you just listed would be another one-time consulting fee to do that plan.
Well, before ARPA funding came along and we were able to upgrade, it was pretty much common sense, get everything. So, you know,
Well, and that's kind of my question on that one. Would it really require a consultant? Considering that the chief does it every year as part of his annual, budget, is it not? The other department- That's the development and asset replacement plan for large equipment, which is.
Oh, he may have already done it. Yeah, it's in the capital improvement plan.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that's
Yeah.
what I made a note on that item because I thought we already had done something very much like that in the capital.
That's,
improvement
I
plan.
was thinking when you said I was thinking of like roads, like a road infrastructure prioritization plan.
Oh, no, I was.
we haven't even gotten there yet.
Yeah, I mean, that,
Where you're talking.
that would
about
be
the
this,
one-time-
that would be this one. I'm looking at the financial stability, develop an asset replacement plan for large equipment. Is that?
Okay,
an
the plan
in-process-
itself is done, but as the fire chief just pointed, it's not funded, of course.
Okay,
There's a lot of things in the CIP that aren't funded at
I
this
think
point.
that was kind of the idea, because how are we gonna start funding this? Because one of our biggest issues that we've had lately is equipment going down, and it's not that it's went down and it's fixable and replaceable. It went down because it's at its end of life and it needs to find the scrap yard and the scrap heap, not be repaired, right? So it needs to be replaced.
okay.
And we don't have the funds to actually replace the equipment. Essentially, Juan and I talked about it as a depreciation schedule, like we would in the private sector, but it's.
Well,
done
maybe
differently.
we could just change the verbiage on that because we
Yeah, it
already have
seems
a
like-
plan.
Yeah.
Because that says to develop a plan.
Well, that's kind of the problem, I think, is we have a lot of plans, but none that are actually being followed.
Well,
Okay.
or funded in this case. So if we've
I think
developed a,
that's the- Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's the.
Better
the-
way to put it.
Yeah, it's not that it's not being. If there's a plan, then in our budget, we need to do it by starting to fund it.
Right.
Otherwise, I mean, that's the next step. And if we don't have the money to fund it, then maybe it's a grant. Or
Yeah,
some other
engine-
miracle.
Engine two replacement needs to be top of that. Sure.
So that, yeah, because I had goal 6 getting moved up to goal 1 for the financial stability, goal 5 to goal 2, and I had goal 2 going down, being moved down the list or off the list. The reason why I had goal 5 still going on there was the, I never figured it all out.
Okay.
This
Optimize
optimized
staffing.
Optimize in-house.
And that was mostly because we're looking to try and find a mechanic to work inside the city so that next time a piece of equipment goes down, we actually have somebody here in-house that can jump on it and have it be priority 1 rather than, second or third on their list to get to.
Yeah, things are gonna break.
Yeah, things break.
We
Yeah,
can count
mechanics.
on, we can count on that.
Yeah.
Trees attack roofs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing we can count on is something breaking.
And I think the grant strategy, I mean, grants, we need to leave just on there because obviously there are grants. And if we have needs, a grant can be the solution. So just we're not dedicating someone to, tracking them, and that's not their main focus. But we still want to be mindful that that's an opportunity to fund some of the things that we have needs for.
Yeah, so this one, where is it that we completed, we're gonna change it to fund.
Yeah.
And do you all agree with that, putting that, it sounds like there's starting to be some agreement here, bringing the grant strategy down.
Well, when I think of something like that, I mean, just starting somewhere, maybe we can only fund every year $100 for each one. But I mean, just starting and creating that, it's like if you're going to start your own personal savings account, start with $5 a month. So even if it's small, if we just say our needs are so huge, we just can't even do it. Could we do it on a small scale just to start showing that we're doing it? And then as we get more money, we're doing it a little bit more and a little bit more. So
This
there's
is-
some
Just to
action.
clarify, this is for the grant strategy?
No, this, I'm sorry, we were talking back to the large equipment replacement.
Oh, right. No, I think that's a good idea.
It-
Asset
there's
replacement
a-
fund.
there's a
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fund, like a reserve account exist for that.
No.
but if we set one up and just started putting, even if it's not very much, at least we're doing a little bit, creating a habit.
Well,
A lot
and-
of cities do it for police and fire. They have a special line item for apparatus replacement.
We used to for
Um,
fire, 52,000 a year. We used to.
Yep. So it's not uncommon. We certainly could try to do that again. I think it would be a small amount though, like you just said.
That's-
Yeah.
But from a community engagement kind of standpoint, if it's showing up on the balance sheet of saying, hey, look, hey, everybody, we had a public works truck go down. We only got $18 in the asset replacement fund. We're gonna have to go into the general fund. It's just connecting those dots so folks, there's a little bit more understanding as to where the hell the money's going.
Right, we're trying every
good
year, we're
point.
trying to put a little
Yeah.
bit away, whatever we can.
Well, Matt said it. We need to maintain that. We've got to get our reserves up to a minimum of 25%. I mean, that's the minimum. 30%. Said. That needs to be a priority. We get the reserve because things are going to break, things wear out, and at least you got some cushion.
Can I ask a quick
we-
question of you? Oh, sorry, Marty, on this, projected general fund reserve, does this include, money savings or money earned from, the out of county assignments that we get paid on for equipment going out at all? Is that included in, and is that included in any of this at all?
For like the fire engine?
Yeah, like when the fire engine or, one of the pickups is out or utilities is out.
No, it's only includes what's in the budget. So like it
Budget
included,
items.
the
Okay,
250,000 that's proposed for engine 2 is included in that.
okay.
I want to go back to this one here, adding to the city's general. Well, so you, is this, did you mean the general fund reserve?
The general fund reserve, yes, and the
Okay.
$100,000 was a WAG.
Right,
So, like,
right. But
Starting point, yeah.
is this the time to like say, this is what we want to go for? And I know that you all will be going into budget season here pretty soon, but is this something that we want to set in that, like a,
My personal opinion is that Measure I is an evergreen. It's a 15-year deal. So the financial health 15 years from now starts now. So we need to at least set a floor, even if it's like doesn't pass the sniff day, even if it's laughably low, $10,000. Like we need to set a floor. Like, hey, part of the direction the city staff is we're going to put a minimum of X amount of dollars toward the general fund because we only have 15 years of these extra monies without going out and asking the community to vote on an extension or another tax measure. So I just want to keep all that.
Yeah,
That's
we
a
need a general fund.
great
reserve.
idea.
It's
Yeah.
a priority. Absolutely. You're going to have a healthy reserve, minimum 25%.
And is there already an amount that we have set that goes up into the reserve account, or is it just whatever is rollover? I understand that we've been pulling from the reserve, so that's kind of a mute question, but was there initially anything set up like that?
So you're asking like an apparatus reserve fund, no, there isn't anything. If you mean just general fund reserve. So this is confusing a lot of times for people that don't work with fund accounting, but we use the word general fund reserve and cash flow interchangeably. So if you look at this particular spreadsheet, you'll see that the projected general fund reserve at the end of 25-26 is just under 800,000. So you're trying to balance the budget between, revenues going in and expenditures so that if we start this year with $1 million, which is what we would be starting with at July 1, you want to end the year with $1 million. And what we're showing with this is you're ending the year with about 800,000. That's the deficit. And so the next year, if you keep doing that, of course, that's what makes it a structural and ongoing deficit. So that's the way the reserve works. It's not a separate bank account. It's not in a separate line item. It's part of your cash flow, and it's how you talk about your beginning and ending fund balance and how you want it to end. Does that sort of make sense? I think I know it's kind of a really
No,
different
that's-
concept than regular accounting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think just the idea here is to say, hey, instead of us just having that $1 million, we want to make sure that we have close to 2 or 3 in 15 years. is what
Right.
you're
And so
kinda-
like, hey, let's draw a line of at least the minimum amount of this much money per budget goes toward replenishing the general fund and the rest of it becomes budget money. Is I guess what I'm proposing here. And I'm
that makes sense from a checking savings standpoint, but when you're talking how
Yeah.
government works, it's throwing me off.
I mean, I agree with you, it does, but the way to think about this is that this number in the red and losing 200,000 is the idea that if we spend the exact same monies again next year, it'll go down another 200,000, right? So next year, the picture's got to look, something's got to give, right?
Right.
Or it won't work. And that means usually making tough choices, just saying.
What would
But
you
that means
suggest then, Marty, for that goal 3, for it to be something measurable? What would you recommend that goal?
Well, I think I would maybe recommend that we do the apparatus reserve. And then if you keep putting money in that, it is available if you need it. If you decide we need to use it, you can count it as part of your overall reserve, but you put it aside as apparatus. And I think I would try to get to at least $1 million general fund reserve, and every year put in 25 or 50,000 into an apparatus reserve. It still counts towards your overall reserve. You're just compartmentalizing it and saying, but we just want to use this for only for apparatus replacement.
like that.
Well, the
We had
apparatus,
We had that plan for my first, well, after, a couple of years after I came on the council. $53,000 or $53,000 a year dedicated for fire apparatus reserve. So,
Yeah.
and chief, I think in your tenure, basically between the 3 city major apparatuses, 30-year cycles, was pretty much every 10 years replacement, right? That pretty much generally Nate. Yeah. And at the time, it was 53,000 a year, worked very well. It was budgeted. We didn't get the surprise, oh no, where we're at now.
Right.
And the last time that was used, I think the former command vehicle, the Ford, to 2018, right? And, that was the last time that was used that was about $43,000 purchase. That was the last time we had a line item for fire apparatus, and then it went away because of our budget. But it's something we need to start doing.
Well, when the fire chief first arrived, he asked me, could we create a reserve account for apparatus? And I said, no, we can't
Well,
afford it.
if we took the money that the state pays us for our apparatus out on strike force, and that's the only place that goes is in a apparatus reserve.
The fire chief would love that.
Well, and then we also have public works equipment also that we'd need to be trying to do the same thing. So we have leaf trucks and dump trucks and, equipment over there as
I mean,
well.
I think most places just have one reserve for apparatus for both
Sure.
police and,
Yeah.
One line item.
yeah, one item for fire, police, public works, and whoever needs, whatever the crisis of the day is,
I just wanted to bring that up for people listening. It's not just fire because we were
Yeah,
kind of.
right, it's-
Correct,
it's all
yeah.
departments, right.
Yep.
You're right.
So
And of
Mark,
course, the major pieces of equipment are public works and fire.
Yep.
So, yeah.
should this one then really be absorbed into that one?
So yeah, goal 3.
Yeah,
and
I would say,
six.
So eliminating this one and
well, I think we
that would
need,
be
I
accomplished
think the
there.
council would probably want to do both.
Well,
Okay.
I think it's important that we keep goal 3 as a goal because that's something that we've been saying to the community through the whole Measure I, that we need to have a healthy
Hmm.
general fund reserve. So we need to keep that
Okay.
in the forefront, I think.
So we could do 10 and 10 and at least get started with it from there. Because we don't know where we're going to be at next year.
Yeah.
You know what
So
I mean? We have a
what do you mean by
sales
10 and
tax, we
10?
don't know.
What do you mean
setting-
by- what do you mean by 10 and 10?
Well, 10,000,
Okay.
as a goal for our general fund and 10,000
minimum.
for the large equipment. Because like I said, we don't know. All these numbers are really, really well done estimates, right? They're not what I'd call a guesstimate, right? It's not a thin air. It's a lot of numbers, a lot of thinking goes into those, but it's not accurate. We don't know where we'll be at the end of the day.
You don't-
Well, because
So-
we won't have our first year general,
Yeah, that's what I
the
mean,
new
like, we
sales
won't
tax, so
know.
we
Yeah.
won't really know until
Yeah.
next year.
So I think
Okay, so we did
establishing,
some reorganizing. Is there any other is there any other ones that we need to lower, higher? Okay, let's go to
No.
economic development. So,
You're
I think
pretty
the-
much finished with goal one, Giovanni.
with
Yeah.
that priority one, yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Because Marty's recommendations, I
I
think
think-
spot on.
is right here, and this is what we put, we
Sure.
replaced it with that one there.
I think that could actually go down.
This one go down?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be goal one.
I think it needs to stay up at the top. If we don't continue to cut costs and generate revenue, we're just gonna stay level or backwards over time. Costs are gonna keep going up. I mean, we can't just, the 1.5% sales tax is making us whole, but the world's costs are gonna keep going up around us. And if we're not generating any new business, new.
I get what you're saying,
anything,
but the revenue generation is economic development. That's kind of what that whole row is about, right? Am I wrong in saying that? Is that not where you'd generate revenue?
Well, taxes and fees are generally where your income
Yeah,
comes
they go,
from.
hand in hand.
Yeah. So maybe they're cross pollinated,
I think they're good.
a reference in both.
Hand in hand.
Marty?
If the council is, would like to move forward with the apparatus fund reserve, is that something they're expecting to start this fiscal year or to do it next fiscal year?
Can we afford it this fiscal year?
Well, in
Not
effect,
entirely, but you're actually making me rethink a couple of
in
things. and-
effect, we are actually putting 250 to the apparatus reserve because we're funding the
The down payment on the new.
And
on engine two. So in effect, we have actually done that to the tune of 250,000.
and
Correct.
$100,000 and
Yeah.
$100,000.
So I don't think we need to do it this year because we've done it with the 250,000 that
agree.
were identified.
Please.
And if we set it up that we add to the apparatus reserve any funds that we get from the state from the use of our equipment, that's really where that money should be going anyway. Because as the equipment gets used, it starts to wear. So, and we just don't use it for general fund operations. We just park it because that's what it's for,
That
So-
proper use of it.
Yeah, next year, well, two thoughts. One, next year I'll plan on, we have a line item for apparatus reserve that we do as part of our presentation, so you can see that. I'm not going to try to squeeze it in for this year. It sounds like that's okay. Two, if I were to channel Andy Heath right now about strike team revenues, he would say, it all just goes into the general fund to balance the budget, and you tell me where you want to move things around. That, like, the idea of taking, let's say, for example, this year, the fire department from strike team generated $200,000 of additional revenue after salaries are paid. Okay, does all $200,000 go into that? But then it looks like our general fund reserve has gone down even lower when we needed 100,000 of that to balance it. So I would recommend that
I'm
you
only
pick a
talking
number.
about the apparatus that they're paying us. They
I'm
pay
sorry?
us for the use of our apparatus. I'm not talking
Yeah,
about
that's
the
what she's
salaries.
saying.
That's what
That's
I'm
what she's
saying.
saying.
That's
That money is helping us be whole right now.
Oh,
Right,
yeah. Oh,
but-
yeah.
But I get that. I understand that. We have to fund it somehow.
Yeah.
And we won't do it this year because we're using 250,000.
So what you're saying, though, is you're suggesting that every year it could be a different number depending on how much additional revenue
Well,
comes
it's
in.
at the council discretion, but that should be our goal.
Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting. Yeah,
I
So-
mean,
there should be a floor.
Because it's not
'Cause
counted, it's like.
the
grants, it's
additional
not
we
being
make
counted.
over and above wages and all the rest of that stuff all goes general fund. I'm okay with all of that. What I'm talking about specifically would be the apparatus cost. They rent our stuff, right?
Well, they pay us for the use of it,
Right.
correct? Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. Just the apparatus cost. Would
That's
be
the
the
only,
goal to put in our apparatus reserve.
that's the only part we keep unless I'm wrong, because salaries we
Well,
get,
no, there's an overage.
well, there is on the apparatus,
There's a
but
blue
the,
sky.
but the salaries are a push.
No, they're
generally.
not.
They're not.
So I think it would be worth it to explain how we get paid from strike team salaries versus apparatus rental.
So we get paid for a couple of different things. The first thing, say, we'll use a Type 3 engine, for example. It's like $154 per hour is what we get for the engine for 16 hours a day on your standard CFA assignment. Then they pay for the cost of the employee at overtime rate based off of whatever we negotiated with the state. Plus they cover the Medicare, the unemployment, the social security, they add all those roll-up costs minus pension. They don't cover CalPERS. And then, because that's part of the only regular employees have that and we pay that anyways. And then they pay, in a lot of cases, fuel, repairs, things like that. And then say the 2-week assignment equals $100,000, then they give us 10% on top of that for admin fee. So yeah, so well, they're paying for the 4 bodies all on overtime rate. The backfill is assumed that one of the people that are on the engine part of the days are going to be on straight time. So the city ends up way ahead. Where was I going with that? In my experience with the current CFAA, you're looking at about $4,000 a day in salaries that come back reimbursed, like 4,400, and then the engine ends up clearing about 2,500 a day. So every day that thing's gone, the city's net positive right around 3,000 when you figure in admin fee and all that.
So cheap, how do repairs figure into that?
So if it happens on an incident, we pay for the part and the incident pays for the labor.
How about after the fact? Like, something now,
So when we go through the incident, we go through what's called the demobilization unit. So they have their mechanics give everything a once over. Sometimes they miss stuff. But generally once you go through demob, you're on your own.
So what I think I heard you say, Vice Mayor Thomas, was that you want to take the amount that's generated just from the rental of the apparatus and just stick that into this reserve fund.
That would be logical.
And then the admin fee would go to the city's
Admin
general.
fee
fund.
and everything else would be.
Part of salaries and general fund. Okay.
Yeah, it's itemized in the way they pay out.
Makes sense.
Is that something that you want reflected in this?
Well, I think it's recorded. We're taking minutes and notes about this. I think that the work plan that I end up fleshing out after this, it will be
Okay.
reflected in that for sure.
Okay. Economic development. Develop a single point of contact for business outreach and development. Leverage existing tourism opportunities. We did say that this could be a website, but is there anything else in there that needs to happen? In process is the code update. Improve city appearance to attract businesses and visitors. And then this one here was suggested to be like 15 to 20 years. And that's the annexation. And then we moved goal 4 from the financial stability of adding an economic development element to the general plan.
And just quickly, the recommendation really is actually to remove the annexation because that's not a 2-year right now priority. And anyways, that's actually initiated by investors. It's not really initiated by us.
So for this revised plan, what do you all think about that?
I'd be
Yeah,
fine
remove
going
that.
We
away.
can't
Moving
afford
it.
an annexation.
Marty, I'm trying to sort of like this moved one, the economic development element to the general plan, is that an added cost?
Yes.
Okay.
So one time.
But pretty much every one of these has a cost to it.
Correct. And I think if there's anything on there that doesn't resonate with the council in the next 24 months, I don't think we should include it. I mean, we can create a place in the document if we want, that's a placeholder for, consider for future goal settings or something. So if, completing an economic development plan doesn't resonate with the council and doesn't interest them, maybe we table that for the next 24 months. Because are you going to want to allocate funds for that next fiscal year? Because we're not doing it this year. So if you don't think you want to do it next year, maybe it's not worth considering for the next 24 months.
Well, so Marty, that would be goal 4. I mean, in my mind, goal 4, improve city appearance to attract businesses and visitors. Yeah, really, no kidding. We need to do that, but that's a total.
Right, we were talking about the economic development plan, though.
But.
The
Well,
e-
we're
elements.
talking about economic development. That's down here, goal 4.
So,
Were
yes.
you talking about the element or not?
He's talking
I'm-
No,
about,
we're talking about all of
He
them at
was
the
bringing
same
this
time.
one up. We were talking about the whole
thing.
thing.
Oh, okay,
and he's
I see.
pointing out
I just
this
said that, you know, that's it. Goal 4 in my mind is really important, but that means code enforcement.
And we're
that's
doing,
why
we're doing actually pretty rigorous right now. I would
Oh,
just
I know.
leave that, yeah.
But,
Okay.
you know,
Where did the element though go? Where did we, it
It's
was
It's
like in the
further up.
wrong
It's in-
place or
it's in
something.
pro-
Oh,
It's got
okay.
in process on top of it.
Uh,
Because it was over here.
No, she's talking about the green, the one that you have the green on.
The one you're holding.
No.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I
Yeah.
thought you were talking about the code, the municipal code
No,
update. I thought
this
that's
one
what you were
is in
talking about.
progress.
No, that, yeah, that,
So-
I would, yeah, remove that because it's in progress. No, I thought this, you were asking me about goal 4 that you're holding in your hand.
Well, the issue here, unfortunately, is they're both goals 4. That one was goal 4
Oh,
in that
okay.
one. So we'll
see.
just call this one 5 for now.
I mean, leveraging tourism, existing tourism opportunities, frankly, I mean, is there an opportunity to go to the people who generate the tourism and, hey, how about sponsoring this initiative? Because it's a symbiotic thing.
Is it going to happen?
I'd do it.
The next, I mean, I
You
think the
know?
website is a place to, we could use
a
that as a
starting point.
tool.
It's
Yeah.
a starting point is
Right.
what I see, you know, in my mind for economic development, because we don't have a lot of money. I look at how do we, to the best of our ability at City Hall, when we talk about goal 1, developing a single point of contact for business outreach and development. I'm not even going to say that's outreach. That's business retention. That's our current business expansion. That's the stuff that's already coming through the door. And I think because we have limited staffing, there might be a different person at the counter. And, you know, do people know, you know, what to say and what to do? So I think that single point of contact, if anybody comes to the counter for anything about business, that we try to get them in front of one person. So we don't give them wrong information or we don't give them all the information, whatever that looks like. And then there was another part I had to go along with that.
But are you, and you're
Would that
saying
be
that this
Joe's
would be a staff?
Well, but Joe can't always be, I don't know. I mean, is it Joe?
No,
Is
I
it
don't know.
Tara?
I
Is
mean,
it
that's-
somebody?
that's
But-
what I'm asking.
It's me or Joe typically. And it
Okay.
depends on, the level at which it's happening. Like when it's Rumiano cheese, it's often somebody like me. It depends on the scope and how big the investment is, right?
But who makes, so when someone approaches the city, who's making that determination with someone at the counter that they're going to talk to you, Joe, or someone else?
Typically that person starts asking a line of questioning that indicates to the person, I need to go to Joe. And then Joe will come to me and say, do you want to do this? Do you want me to do this? And we have a quick conversation about it. So,
We
I
already
mean-
have that.
Well, we sort of do, but I think, again, back to community engagement, I mean, this is where, in my experience, this is where we fall short a lot of the time because we not because anybody's not trying hard, but because it doesn't always work that smoothly, honestly. You know, so somebody gets asked a question, they give a quick answer, it's the wrong answer, you know. So all I'm saying is that was a goal, having a single point of contact. And if we could do that with existing people, and I think one of our other goals was cross-training staff so that, you know, everybody kind of knows these are the key questions to ask, or at this point, this is where you put up the little flag and go, this is not a counter question. This is a Joe question or a Marty question. And just having a way at the counter so that people feel heard. They know that they're going to have like an intake form almost. It's like you're asking these questions. The right person's not here today instead of trying to help them when you can't. And then there's a definite follow-up because we're small staffed and I get that. So it's not going to be perfect, but having a mindful process that everybody knows what it is. Because I've been at the counter and I don't experience it at the counter myself as a council person. So I just think there's room for improvement
don't disagree.
on that.
Almost like a concierge. Hey, this is what I'm trying to do. Help hold my hand through this.
Someone who can even ask the right questions. Sometimes, especially when they're our own local people, they come in and they don't even know the right questions to ask. And so that's where it's sort of like, who's the person? And even as a council member, I mean, I'm happy to volunteer and say, hey, you know, we'll have Lori give you a call, whatever that looks like. But just so that someone can actually sit down and say, tell me about what you're trying to do. And we can go through, here's the steps and get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay. So I'm looking at the possible initiative that says hire an economic development officer. But we're not looking at that aspect. We're looking
No.
at more of the create a business support center to assist with permits, regulations, resources. And but we're not even looking at that. We're looking at essentially a more in-depth take a message card.
Well, or doing it ourselves because we have the knowledge and the expertise. We can't afford to hire an economic development person right now. And honestly, if we hired someone, they probably wouldn't live here. They'd probably not live here. There's no housing. And we'd have someone who would just come and they'd go to conferences and they'd go to workshops and they'd do pamphlets and flyers and send them out and hope to get somebody here. And I think we need someone who is here, who really cares, who's going to, make sure people have that positive experience, not, and this is the hard part. And again, I love all the city staff. They have a million things on their plate. And so how do we do that in a way that people, feel taken care of? And I don't
That's a
have,
real question then. Is that a 2-year goal?
it better be
Is
a
that something that we can,
5-month goal because we can't keep kicking that stuff out if we want to.
but you
take
just
care of
said
our
that we
community.
can't hire the person to do the job.
No, that's
And we
what I'm
don't,
saying.
and we're already that's
But
the problem.
But this is my big issue. If we keep looking at stuff that's critical for making sure our community has trust in us, making sure that we provide a good service to people that are trying to do things that are going to generate revenue, we have to figure out how to make time for that. And I'm acknowledging that we all have a lot on our plates.
Yeah.
I'm going to say because but negates all that. And we need to figure out if this is a priority, we're either going to figure out how to do it and just spend a little bit of time figuring out how to do it. And if we're going to kick it down the curb, then I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we don't figure it out. And like I said,
Can-
I would volunteer to be that person,
Yeah.
honestly, at
Can
least
I-
be a point of contact.
Can I approach this from a little bit different angle? I feel like we're going through each one of these, right? And we're like, well, this is where we need to spend money. This is where we need to spend money. Can we do something where each one of us comes up with 3 ideas of, hey, we have X amount of dollars. Where do you think that money is most needed at? Right? I mean, is it ALS? Is it a children's librarian? Is it a mechanic? Is it, business development or what was their name? Economic development officer. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys to work from that aspect or that direction on that.
That makes perfect sense to me. I'm writing my list
I
right
mean,
now.
Because
Yeah.
like Matt was saying, we're limited in our funding right now. Are we going to try and figure out our police department? What's the next 2 to 3 years, right?
This one, I'm taking out the ones that are completed. then,
Yeah.
Or in progress or process.
Mhm.
So we can then see, then we've already identified the ones that don't have a price tag to it, but pretty much everything here does. You hear website, here hiring a person, here there's a consultant, there's it's code enforcement. So we can certainly do that. Do you want to do that for all of these?
I was just thinking overall in general,
Yeah.
big picture, and then figure out how to categorize and organize our goals based off of, we all agree that
Yeah.
we need X, right?
Yeah.
Now, how do we build our priorities and goals to get X taken care of in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yep.
Is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm just speaking out loud to the group. and letting
Let's
the
do
group-
that. Let's
Because I agree with what Lori's saying. I'm not picturing how we're going to get.
So
right.
let's take it some time then, if you could write out those 3 priority areas that you would say in the next 2 years, this is where our priority on investment will need to happen.
There you go. Hasn't changed from last time.
Okay, so this one, these 2? Like what
No,
would be-
it
what would be
falls
fine?
under public safety.
Okay, yeah.
That's the priority.
Yep.
Of course, we're working on an avenue to replacement. My mind is, okay, we need to get our financial ducks in order, and that's what we're doing, right? It's gonna take some time. It's all about our sworn duty is to provide adequate public safety services, number 1 priority. Everything else is nice to have, and we know that there's a lot of nice things in this. It all makes it a great community, but it's police, fire, and not in that order. Police, fire, public works. It's what I all category. I throw that all under the public safety category. Public works because of the public infrastructure. Look, you know, every municipality has these issues. But look at the conditions of our streets. You know, our public works crew does an outstanding job. They're, you know, we've got them a little bit of help. They need a little more help, and we're getting there. But it's all about, you've got to provide a safe, efficient community, number one, before you have all this other stuff, right? There's an order.
So with that, you had said specifically engine two replacement.
Absolutely.
And then
Absolutely.
is there anything specific on police fire?
Well, like
Or- and
Evan
you're saying
said earlier,
street repair
we
like
need to
this.
move toward ALS fire, you know, right? So, yeah, there are a lot of issues. We're running a 1960 model now with 1.0, right, Chief, on our engines, right? And that's not sustainable. I mean, a lot of things aren't sustainable. Right now, we're trying, you know, we're considering going back to establishing a police department, something I never thought we'd ever have to do. But, you know, for a number of reasons, that's what we're looking at now. Those are all big ticket items. Those are big costs. And I mean, we purchased a new engine too. What's right behind that? Truck 4, right behind that.
Well,
you know?
that's what I'm
I
gonna
mean,
say is like,
yeah.
we technically have truck engine 2 in the works, right? So
Sure,
maybe it would be like the truck 2 replacement would be the.
sure. But you're always
Truck
going to
4,
have,
sorry.
you're always going to have the fire
Something,
apparatus. We'd mentioned earlier on the public works side, ARPA funding, we were able to purchase, you know, with help from ARPA, a new backhoe and some other things we really needed badly. But there's, you know, there's a big list, but I think we know we need to, we have to save some money, get a healthy general fund reserve again. But we still have to provide the basic public safety, public infrastructure, governmental services for our citizens.
So is that correct? Does that reflect, so engine two replacement, this goal here, right size the fire with ALS, and then street repair.
Sure. And I'm saying, you know, but we need to maintain all public safety, police, fire, public works. You know, and it's an ongoing expense that unfortunately we have to provide because, you know, you wouldn't need law enforcement in it. You know, I can tell you, I got a lot of years in that business. You wouldn't need law enforcement if people did the right thing, right? But you're always going to need fire. But unfortunately, the world is 70-30, so people do bad things to people. So you're going to have, obviously, have law enforcement because there are criminals and dirtbags out there that need to be dealt with, right? Keep the public safe. But those are expensive. Those are expensive operations just due to the nature of the business, right? It's 24/7 work. Then you have to maintain your public works, public infrastructure, streets, you know, the drainage, the whole thing. I mean, those are, in my mind, those are our priorities to provide the citizens. Right? And after that, we get our economic, you know, our finances together, right? And then we can start moving toward these other additional staff needs down the road.
Okay.
So that's what I have.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Then
If you can't read it, I'm sorry. I can.
defined funding contributions toward GF asset replacement.
Yep.
So is that what
Yep.
you mean here?
Is
So-
Matt's writing what's in mine?
Yeah, probably.
Good.
Yeah,
Good.
probably.
ALS service.
Yep.
And sustainable economic development infrastructure. And when you say that, are you, I mean, just kind of in general, this one?
So yeah, like I'm not super drilled down on any of the detail of it. I'm like, it feels like the systems are broken. So anything we add to the system continues to be broken. So let's get a not broken economic development system. And then how we fine detail it, I have less opinions on.
Can I ask a question? Because I don't know the answer. So you're talking about ALS for the fire department. Is our ambulance service ALS?
So
Do
I
they,
don't know.
I'm not done. You can't have the
sorry.
floor yet
Sorry.
there, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry.
Does the ambulance roll when a 911 call comes in for a traffic accident?
So ambulance service is a little weird. 911 system is a little bit different. Our ambulance that's based here in Willows often gets pulled out of our area, either by another 911 call.
Well,
in a
I'm
different
familiar
district.
with that.
Yeah, okay. But also on transfers. Okay, so yes, when we do have a traffic accident, let's say in Wood Street and Humboldt, an ambulance is dispatched, whether it's coming from Willows or
Yeah, I
or,
know. I've
you know,
I've
so
been involved enough of that to know
Yeah.
that there's positioning and all back and forth, and And now that Orland has the second one and they're working on repositioning, is it correct?
Yeah,
So they're working on that particular aspect. So I'm only asking this question because if we're talking about ALS, I'm not sure where that actually fits in the priorities in the grand scheme of things. And I'm just trying to learn. If we have an ambulance that rolls its ALS, and I know we have one paramedic that's on a fire truck when he's on duty,
Mhm.
or more. I don't know if we have more or not. I'm just trying to figure out how that ALS translates. I know it's public safety, but we have a lot of things to catch up on, and I'm
Mhm.
just trying to put it in
So
perspective.
here's a real world situation that we had. You guys been telling a story?
I can tell some Thunder Hill stories too.
So here's an incident that we had with a under 2-year-old where we were waiting on the ambulance for a half an hour with CPR in progress. That ambulance showed up and they had the drugs that we needed. And now if we had those drugs sooner, would it have been a different outcome than what we had? Um, Hard to tell, but that's the idea there is that those medicines that ALS is allowed to use that paramedics like Chief Monk and Captain Lombard are allowed to use, they're put into place for a reason, right?
Right.
So if we're waiting a half an hour to use those because we don't have an ALS ambulance nearby or close
Or a
enough,
paramedic handy
or
to administer them.
it's not the paramedic. We have the paramedics. We just don't have the certificates to do that.
Intubate or
Yeah.
It's the protocols.
It's the, we don't, yeah, we're not signed up with those protocols and Chief has
Okay.
much deeper knowledge on that. So that would be where,
Even though you have the education and you have the certificate individual, but because the unit's not established as that, you cannot follow it.
and that'd be a great.
Sounds like government in a way.
Mhm.
So quick question. I know the ambulance, they will bill the patient for everything that they provided, drugs, et cetera. Does the fire department, if they are ALS, have that opportunity? Thank you.
Out of curiosity, what's a life pack cost nowadays?
He said 30.
Okay, I want to continue on that. Mayor Hudson had put down, invest in a startup of police department, public safety. So I put that back over here and completed. And you're saying start putting it.
Well, yeah,
what
I'm
does
saying that
mean?
if we're gonna complete a goal, right?
Yeah.
Let's not just take it off the board. Let's
Yeah.
continue down that road,
Yeah.
right? Like if I'm starting to cut a trail, I don't want to just quit when I get to that first
Yep.
mile marker, right? I want to make it, if I want to make a 3 mile trail, I want to try and work on that
Yeah.
next mile. And I feel like that's the next mile is, okay, now that we have this, how do we use that to move forward to the next step? And I
Okay,
feel
and,
like that's setting aside the money
Okay.
for that initial,
So it's
brunt of an
setting aside
upstart, yeah.
funding for that.
because there's a big financial upstart cost
Yeah.
to us doing that. Where the renewal costs may be very similar to our current contract, maybe a little bit more. That upfront cost to get it started is going to be the biggest and hardest part for us
Okay.
to get the finances for.
And just, Giovanni, just, mine was along the same line.
The same lines?
PD.
Okay, on the PD.
That,
Okay.
that's what I was talking
Perfect.
about, with specific, but it didn't make sense.
that makes sense now. But that reflects what you two are saying.
Mm-hmm.
That if we're gonna do something, let's start investing in it here. Second thing you put down was smooth the process for new business and construction services, economic development.
So when I talked to a couple different contractors and they say it's difficult sometimes when they come into City Hall to try and do business. And I think Lori was kind of speaking to the same thing. It is difficult. So, and that's whereas my point was I wasn't trying to argue with Lori.
Yeah.
I'm just bringing up the question which item are we going to prioritize
Right.
as, okay, which one's getting funded sooner than later?
Is there one particular in here that that would do that?
It'd be goal one.
Goal
You know,
one,
I
okay.
just think would be kind of underneath that.
And then
It'd
the
be
other
underneath
one
that.
is here, the youth development director.
Mm-hmm. This is kind of my out of the box thinking was we're talking about a children's librarian. Right now we have a third party contractor for our recreational departments. And so I'm curious if there's a way to roll essentially the two positions into one and just have a youth development coordinator that's anything youth related within the city, because we're not a huge town. You know, can they handle both those at the same time?
Okay.
Is there a way to do the children's librarian? And maybe not, maybe librarian, children's librarian might not be the right word because they're setting up activities for the kids, right?
Youth service.
Yeah, can we have a youth services that's like, yeah, it's a little bit in charge of, youth soccer, and then they'll go and they'll, have a public, kids reading day or whatever.
Okay.
That's, an idea of combining two positions into one to fit the needs of a small town, but still provide, a lot of services.
All right, I'm gonna be just different than everybody.
Okay.
Okay, business retention and expansion, single point of contact. So this one here,
Right.
Infrastructure, safe streets, sidewalks. That one. And code.
Code enforcement. So in my mind, everything's important, right? I mean, we can't disagree. We need to do a lot. I'm looking at the board. In my mind, public safety is very important, but we have a very well-functioning fire department. Thank you, Chief Monk. We have a contract with the sheriff's office in the short term. So if we're talking 2 years, then I want to focus on really looking at what do we need to do today to make sure that we are increasing our revenue base for tomorrow. Because looking back over the last 20 years or so, we have kicked so much stuff, so many cans down the road and not dealt with things. We haven't dealt with sidewalks. We've just always tightened our belt, but we've never focused on economic development and what do we really need to do to generate more revenue, which comes from taxes and fees. That's how government gets its money. If we don't start doing that now in some way, we're just when do we actually start doing it? So to me, making it important, I am so tired of being out in the community, more so now that I'm on the council, I couldn't even go buy a hickory shed without being told by the guy I bought him from that he's had no less than 5 people say they just came into the city to ask a simple question and got yelled at. Now, do I believe that? I don't. And I gave him my cards and I said, the next time someone says that, please have them call me so I can figure out why you're having this experience. But I like to tell people because I love our staff. I think we have great staff, but we're also a little bit broken. We have downsized to the point that we are just in survival mode. And so we need to acknowledge that. But we also have to start deciding how are we going to have better processes? How are we going to make certain things important? And to me, have an point of contact, whoever that is, and it's a point of contact. It's not, oh, sometimes it's this person and sometimes it's that person. And who decides who that person is when neither of those people are at the counter? When someone walks in or when someone calls. So I just think it's imperative if we want to start building community trust, if we want to have a community that people are proud of, that they like what they see, starting with that civic engagement, we have to start somewhere. And so everything's important. I don't disagree at all with Gary or Evan, but we have to pick another path to be doing at the same time, or I just think we're just doing the same old, same old.
Yours? For maintenance, is there a particular goal here that speaks to that, or do we need to
Well,
write something?
here's my concern. We have pushed so much downstream that we have items that need attention. And I'm not going to say the city hall needs to be painted, but it does. But I don't know if you ignore stuff long enough, it goes from $1,000 job to a $5,000 job. So I think we really need to pay attention to updating and curing some of our deferred maintenance that we have delayed, pushed down the roads. And one of those things that was Marty brought up on the last issue is, and my brother just came into town for the first time, and he says, "Hey, Vice Mayor, talk to your city about improving the street signs." We drove right past Pacific Avenue, couldn't find it, as the sign is faded. And that says a tremendous amount about what the looks of the city is. And so I think we need to hit deferred maintenance, those types of items. They're typically can be small costs, but they're critical to how we look as a city. It addresses what the city looks like. And then maybe it's even just painting one of the equipment sheds down in, for the public works down at Jensen Park that's falling down or falling apart. That stuff becomes more expensive the longer you wait. That was my thought about deferred maintenance.
And is there one that, because I want to make sure that we capture, is that infrastructure?
That's probably more infrastructure.
Then asset replacement, which is does that cover what you're
Yeah.
thinking? And then business support, economic development. Is there one in particular here?
Well, I like what we had on our list originally, which was single point of
Is that goal number one?
create a business support center.
Support.
And it all goes back to the same thing as when the customer comes in, did they leave with a positive experience and enough information? So a single point of contact. I know, we have, when Tara's at lunch, there's nobody sitting there. So having somebody that sits there at the front counter in those times and they're informed and trained, that can actually address the people walking in. Tara does a great job, but I think we need just to improve the experience. And by the way, Marty, I liked your concept of us walking through a practice run through city process. I came with the idea of trying to do a quote unquote parcel map on my property as a test through the system. The only real problem was that to do it right, you had to have all the engineered drawings and stuff like that. And it just kind of blew my ability to do that. So I have to come up with something else if you're still wanting to do that. But again,
I was going to say, yeah.
But my concept was a good idea, and when I first talked to Joe and Tara about it, they were all in tune, but then I started looking at the requirements, which a surveyor engineer would draw the map and have all of the details and the elevations and blah, da, 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 and I just couldn't do all that, and I didn't know how we could walk through that process, so I need to reconnoiter and come up with another
So-
another
So you
plan.
bring something up here that kind of is my kind of question to the whole economic, yeah, just talking about counter service, right? This concierge thing, right? So how much of this is, hey, it has absolutely nothing to do with the city staff and their staff interaction, but hey, man, I got this like laundry list of engineering things that now I have to go through, and oh my God, this is a big pain in the butt. And now the government becomes the harbor, like, yeah, the government's just impossible to deal with. Look at all this stuff, and like, okay, we can't do anything about that. Like, so separating the signal from the noise, and how much of it is government BS, and how much of it is, stuff we have control over.
Well, and I think if you talk to staff, if someone comes in like a Jack in the Box or someone who does projects all the time, they know what they need to do. So it's our more local people, our current businesses, people who want to start a business who don't know. And if you all of a sudden you have to even do a site plan. I did a site plan once for a client and John Wanger was funny. He goes, "Oh my gosh, it's not on a napkin." So there's just that degree of, sophistication that people, and stuff's not hard to do, but they just have to know they have to
Right.
do it. And if they can't do it, having maybe some resources available, whether it's a full-blown architect, or maybe there's just other people that are draftsmen or people that can help someone do it if they can't do it.
Is there a world where this is a problem that is shared with every municipality in the state and somebody else has solved it with like an FAQ on the website of, hey, here's your step by step? What if somebody's already solved this and it's just like a couple of phone calls and all shucks and now we got a solution?
Well,
What I'd like to do now is, we did this last time, and it's now looking at prioritizing them as far as rating them. I've given you each 5, 3, and 1. Could you put on, you come up here and then rate using that weighted system, your priority, which is your number 1, you put the 5, your number 2, you put the 3, and the third priority, you put a 1. Well, we're part of what I'm hearing here is that there's some priorities on as far as the goals that are out here that are, last time we did the priorities. Now it's sounding like there's some, like the top 3 that people want to see done. It might span this section. Is that, I want to make sure I get what you're needing. Okay. This one is for the goal. Yeah. This one is for the goal. The ones that you had identified, these are the lists that you had all identified, and there are some common ones here, right? So replacement, asset replacement, asset replacement. And so what I'm looking for is what is the collective priorities on these goals, on specific goals that you would like to see done
For the next 2 years. And we're talking about a
over the next 2 years.
2 years.
Now I want them to rank it. Yes, out of all the ones,
And rank them on,
and rank them on, like, bring your,
on these two?
no, on these papers,
Oh.
On the white paper.
on the,
like
on
we
the,
did
on the goals,
So 5, 3, 1, that's it? We get three
you get
choices?
three choices.
5 is number 1.
5 is number 1, and so here are your,
You're making this tough. Oh, you already did that. Pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah. So for instance, my top one was this single point of contact, I'd put a 5 right there, saying that is my number 1 top priority. If I'm like, the second one that I want is a youth director, I'd put a number 3 there. And then the first one, like the third priority that you want, if it's the ALS, you put number 1. That make sense?
You
And,
can't
and we've
buy
already
4
funded larger.
It's tough.
Already done.
Makes sense.
Well, although, I mean, we haven't done that yet.
Paying off a loan for it, that's not us planning on the next.
Here, I have that. Yeah.
Final large equipment replacement, that's not.
Well, engine 2 back in.
Yeah, but that's just paying off. That's a loan, that's not a.
The only thing that is an action as far as that is a website. That would be that's something that if in the next 2 years.
Well.
Yes. Yep. Yes, yeah. It is.
You're
So-
tough. You're tough.
Can we do 3 more?
Which one are you looking for? Oh.
It's over there at
Right here. Okay. Okay, so what we have, just a review here. Number 1, again, this is just collectively from the council. Number 1 priority would be this point of contact for business development. Number 2 is invest in the startup with a PD. Number 3 is tied, which is a fund reserve, and we'll let staff figure out what that system would be. Cause right, is that?
Yeah,
You're kind of saying
it
those
was
two?
bridging the gap between the two. We just gotta put some money away.
Oh, actually, okay, no, that one's the
Savings
third one.
account.
Yeah.
Then it's deferred maintenance. And deferred maintenance and this savings, the seek cost savings and revenue generation as a priority. And then this is streets, safe streets, and then youth director that, and then figure out if there's a tie-in with the children's librarian. Does that make sense, Marty?
I see a 1, 2, and a 5. That's still a number 1? Is that how that works?
So I'm adding them all together. So basically this is, what is it? That's
Oh,
12 points. So I added them all up because part of the weighted one is that one person, hey, this was my top one. For 2 people, it was my second, and for 1 person, it's my third. But collectively, there's a lot of points in there. So that's 12 points.
I don't
is
know,
what
I
I'm-
just find it hard. But my colleagues, I find it hard. Mine's not up there. I don't understand. In my mind, that's not our most important priority in the city of Willows. But
Okay, so if we go back to this number 1, just to understand process, I don't want to lose what you were saying.
no, I said it.
One, only the 20 adds up to 12.
Right.
Get 1 out of 12, and number 5 is carrying the bulk of the weight on it.
So weighted.
If the weighted
number
system-
5 was their
So
top
it's like
choice.
for a first, second, third priority. So weighted system of like, even though, because one person, right,
It's kind of like the 2020 election.
well, and just like this one's, yeah,
Now,
correct.
Well,
Exact-
number 1 was the third choice.
Number one's our bottom.
oh,
Number 1's the bottom.
Well, yeah,
That
number one,
five
I'm
was the
sorry, okay,
top one.
yeah, no,
No,
no.
number
Number
5 was
one
the
is the
mistake.
bottom choice. It was just worth 1 point. Whereas the 5 was the lower
bigger weight.
weighted, so that got more points. Okay. Marty, any questions on this as far as the priorities as we put together a revise of this? Is there any questions that you have of the council as to how they landed or how this?
not this one. Back. Look at the document, if I did.
And I think the overlying thing here is that obviously everything is super important, or it wouldn't even be on here based on the council's work last year. And so I think it's just saying our next level of effort, and we've already put a lot of effort in a lot of places. So I think public safety, I don't think if it's not the number 1 in this final little vote, it doesn't mean it's not important. I think what I'm seeing is that the city's already put some stuff towards it. You know, they've done the feasibility study, they've gotten the grant for Pell Water to get the EKG. You know, so since there's been a little push there, you know, now there's just like, let's push a little bit in another space is kind of what I'm seeing here. So it's not taking away or detracting from
Well,
anything.
and
It's,
what I'm seeing, what this is also telling me too, is that the priorities stay about the same. This financial stability got more votes, second most, third. And we said that we want to pull this through in a thread. And then this one here and that one. So the points even spread out equally the same. So it feels like the priorities that were outlined last year are the same, but there's some goals that have risen up to be higher.
There's gonna be, my question, yeah, so this document that we've been working under isn't going to be completely gutted
No,
and shredded.
no, these will not be removed. All these will not be removed. It's what we're saying is out of all of these goals, there is, these are the priorities communicated to the city staff that.
Well, no, I understand because it's tough. You
So
know,
it's
you gave
like-
us 3 choices and like, you know, the deferred maintenance. That's huge.
Yeah.
We've got a major deferred maintenance. And I equate that real similar to large, well, not large, but equipment replacement. Those are,
Mhm.
that's all part of the deferred maintenance. We've been kicking the can, and kicking the can and kicking. It just kind of ends up costing more money, but I don't know. It's
Well, that's where I wonder, I mean, that's where city staff will look at this, because it's not just, we said here, large equipment replacement, but really making sure that the general fund reserve or the cash flow and for maintenance, it might be that city staff takes all three of those together and say, this is the work plan around how we're going to do that. So we're not saying the how we're going to do this yet. That's what they're going to outline for us, but it's more of the what. That where it's, as a council, you're saying, this is what we want you to focus on and prioritize.
just looking for draft documents.
Well, and I hope that this document that we started with doesn't go away, but it shows completed. Because if we, we'll lose that history of being able to show that in, 2024, the council worked hard, they came up with this document, and there's been stuff that's been accomplished. And I would hate for us to lose that.
Yeah.
So we can be showing,
Well,
and then maybe this new priority thing, it's
Maybe that's what we need to add to it too, is maybe a past, complete, accomplished.
like
since
a
inception.
summary or a glossary attached that shows
Yeah,
the
just
items
like a-
have
and
been
it's
completed.
single line items, right? Saying, hey, PD assessment done.
Well,
They're great talking points in the community, and it's easy to forget, the great accomplishments, and showing that, we're talking about stuff and we're actually getting things
Yeah.
done.
yeah, I
Well, a
think that,
status box next slide, just to- right, so.
yeah,
It'd be
it,
great to have it on the new website too.
it's just as important of accomplishing thing as communicating to the community that it got accomplished. I think that having more capacity, and I understand it's a staff capacity thing, but I that's probably one thing that we probably could do better on, is waving the flag when we get something right. It doesn't exist if people don't know about it. You know what I mean?
I think just also keep in mind that, Giovanni's going to assemble all of this. He and I will have a back and forth, and then it'll come back to the council for final presentation and any final tweaks if you think we didn't get something right or didn't hear something. And then that'll close out this process, and then I'll take that finished approved document and flesh it out into a more detailed work plan, working with the staff, and put, like I said before, some meat on those bones. So the work plan's not going to come back when this comes back. That'll be at a later date.
One thing that I do want to say here that's not like at a council meeting when we're voting on stuff. Willows PD is betting all of Measure I on Willows PD. The startup costs, so like the operating costs of GCSO, right? Hey, let's assume operating costs from GCSO to us, probably let's just best case scenario stays the same. The startup costs is betting all of the excess revenue of Measure I in getting Willows PD up and going. So I don't want that to come up at the wrong time. That's where I'm at on it. We're betting the farm on doing that if we go down that road.
It's expensive.
It is very expensive.
Is there-
And I agree with you on that 110%. But if we don't start, we never will, right?
Fair enough.
Just
wanna-
so, and it didn't initially look that way, but then once we start, realizing, hey, this is where money's already been allocated to keep up with the services that we already have or to keep up where we're at, then it turned into what you're saying. It still doesn't mean that it shouldn't be a priority for us to try and somehow achieve. Whether that's through writing letters to our senators or assembly members to start finding funding for us in small rural towns like ours that don't have a police force, or a way to help benefit law enforcement, because they're underfunded, and unfortunately with news and everything else, they're hated. So it's hard to get funding and anything else like that for them. So still a large need. And what I don't want is my first 2 months here where we were having special meetings within 24 hours because we were told our services were going to stop 30 hours from now. So that's what I don't want to happen. I don't want somebody else to be able to hold that flag over my head.
ultimate, and this, now's not the time to flesh this all out. My question rhetorically would be, is that an admin issue or a GCSO issue? Sensitively.
I don't know. Only time would really tell, right?
Only time will tell.
We, you know, as a majority council at the time, we've made a promise, and Rick and I, you know, proudly serving the subcommittee, made a promise to our citizens, the electorate, who elected us, speaking just from myself, on the basis that we would look seriously at the establishment of the police department. Way up. That's been, for Measure I to pass, that was our message from the city to our citizens. And that's what, you know, we have an obligation. And ultimately, do our best to make the right choice where we go, and starting with, you know, the November tax proceeds coming in, will be our step one. But that's, did I ever think in 2017 we'd ever be having a discussion? No, but here we are.
Yeah.
Perfect time.
Well, so, I want to make sure that, you know, what I'll do is I will put this together. What I'm seeing is priorities, some of them a little shifting a little bit. Is there anything that any more of those concerns, like, hey, what about that one? We do, you know, those, well, I mean, we'll make sure that they're reflected in the report. None of these are going to come off of the report, except for the one that you all had said, let's put this to the back, the annexation one. And then we'll put, oh, you know, I didn't, there is a score here that you put on this one with the code.
Just on the code, because to me, having a solid code that's updated in the new century that we're in, and hopefully when we have our joint meeting with the planning commission, there's a lot of stuff in the code that is local, that hopefully we're going to have the ability to look through and see exactly what we want the code for Willows to look like, because Harrison Associates doesn't know Willows, so they don't have past planning commission experience. Garages, fences, side yard. I mean, there's just stuff that's come up as an issue at the planning level for years. But then to me, once that's done, that we really look at code enforcement. And in my mind, if we're going to redo our municipal code, if we're going to have a code, we need to be prepared to enforce it. So if we're not going to enforce it, I think it begs the question, why do we have it? So just again, as we look at it, I mean, I was reading through 18 pages of a sign ordinances going, how much of this do we, you know, do we have to have? It can get crazy.
Oh, you guys want to talk?
So that's
Permitting,
coming up and
tried
it's
to-
in process, but I think it's in process, but we still have to vet it. We still have to really look at it. We still have to really say, this is what we're now going to live with as our code. So are we spending the appropriate amount of time on it, getting the appropriate amount of input on it? And are we
Well,
going to then live with it?
And by noting that, that does elevate it for staff to say, we still want to make sure that we're,
It still has a lot of work that needs to be done, which is going to take time. So
Well, along,
I'd-
yeah, that makes me feel a lot better in this discussion, because like back to my question, we're not going to gut this document, are we?
No.
We're not. So that's good. That's good, because code enforcement, our code is, oh, yeah,
it's critical.
yes.
It's
absolutely.
the absolute
And
baseline
it's-
for
it's gonna
everything
be
that we
one of
do in
those
this town.
Progress on our chart or whatever, but yeah, it's all, that's what, you know, boy, that was unfair, Giovanni. with Only 3 choices, but anyway, that's okay. That's okay.
I just wanted to say that I'm hoping with the stuff that's in process and the things we've accomplished, speaking of process, in the actual document, we find a way to keep it, but differentiate it from, you know, the core. I want it to be either a separate section or color coded, or I don't know what, but it should be separate from the new ongoing focus and goals that were just articulated by the
Yeah,
council.
with the status bar.
Or something, yes.
Top of the document.
I'm
Hey,
sure
these are
Giovanni
things
can
from
come up with
last year we
something.
did. Yay.
Yeah.
No pie charts, so, right? Okay, good.
So
Dang
in
it.
priority number 3, public safety, the red line completes goal number 1. And we did the study, but I think critical mass is, we're going to work towards a 2-year extension of the PD of the sheriff's contract to get us through the 25, 26, 27, 27. And that should be on this list.
Absolutely.
Replacing goal number one is get the 2-year extension, because we know if we were to start today, we would be able to get it done in 2 years.
Right.
Based on the study we had. So we need to have as a goal one, priority 3, get a 2-year extension of the tariff. Because we can't do anything, we couldn't get it done, not with the money that we have. And literally getting started, getting a police station, getting the equipment, getting a commander and officers, 2 years, not enough time.
No, that's
Need that
kind of
2-year
what,
extension.
that's kind
Well,
of like what
but-
Matt was saying, was that it takes the entire 15 years of our Measure I tax income to just get us started. let
To get the
alone
money to.
To get the money.
To say that earlier when we were, but we need
But-
that
Ah,
2-year
That's
extension.
important.
Well, I think that will come out
One-
in the work plan as well, is
I
that
mean,
in order to do this, what are the realistic investments we can make? How long is it going to take for that then to onboard, and what type of extension? Is that right? I mean, that's what you'll have to,
Yes, I mean, those kinds of details we would put into the work plan for sure. And there's other ones that there's not worth bringing up now, but I could add to the plan that I know about, but maybe the council doesn't
Right.
know about, but fulfills some of these goals,
Okay.
right? So
Yeah.
that'll all be
Yeah.
detailed in the plan.
perfect. Great.
Perfect. I need to cut in for a quick second. I have another meeting that I had planned before this. It's not a meeting. I have baseball to go coach. I don't have anybody else to take over for me. So Rick, I'm gonna pass this off to you
Boy,
to close everything out. And,
Well, And I think that, I mean, I've
no,
got what I
if you
need.
guys are having good conversation, then I don't want to interrupt it,
once
so.
you close the meeting, we'll just have general conversation. No, we can't do that, can we? Yeah, we can't do that. All right.
Just about baseball, Rotary.
No, so I'm gonna leave it I'll leave it to you, and that way you guys can close it out when you're get
We
it ready,
could-
so.
We could discuss baseball or wager on this game.
Well, I think we got a good start, but like I said, the sheriff's contract is critical.
Yep.
Critical that we get that extended.
Yeah.
And that really basically gives us 3 more years.
You know, it's important, Rick, because this list, you know, it's a general high level list, but it's probably too high level. That needs to be clarified in our list, in our goals.
Yeah,
Right.
so our current contract goes through June of 26. Right?
Mhm.
So if we get an extension, we get to June of 28.
We can certainly make note of that here, but that certainly will be part of that work plan. that
And as
staff-
soon as the budget's over, I will be hitting up the Public Safety Committee for a meeting with the sheriff's office to start discussing.
That
The next
conversation, we
round.
need to get to that.
Do.
But that's what we have to do, is make sure we're protecting our citizens.
Absolutely.
So.
Okay.
I have nothing more. You have anything else?
That was still tough.
It's tough. It is tough when you have to, and it's hard
Yeah.
decisions.
So Matt, Lori, last time, how many of these notepads did we go through on their first set?
Oh, we
A
got
bunch.
a bunch of them, yes.
A lot of them. But it was
Well,
a great document
Yeah.
we ended up with.
Yeah.
and We, you win some, you lose some.
Yeah.
I mean, we all, I think the final document was a pretty good document. So good
Great.
job.
Great.
Giovanni, thank you for your efforts here, and Marty for putting it together. With that, it is 4:03, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank y'all.
Good job. Good job.
Thanks. Thanks. Thanks.